All right,
we're going.
All right, thanks, Jared. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 1st, 2022 public hearing on Atlantic mackerel management, Tautog recreational slot limit, shortfin Mako prohibition, groundfish maximum retention, and some other housekeeping measures. My name is Story Reed, and I'm an assistant director for the Division of Marine Fisheries. Unfortunately, Director Dan McKiernan is unable to join us tonight due to a scheduling conflict, but he will certainly be reviewing all the comments from tonight and all the written comments that come in before the deadline. Tonight, we are joined by three members of our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission, Chairman Ray Kane, Lou Williams, and Vice Chair Mike Peardnock. From the Massachusetts Environmental Police, we have Lieutenant Colonel Pat Moran, Lieutenant Matt Bass, and Lieutenant James Cullen. And from the Division of Marine Fisheries, our staff, we have Deputy Director Mike Armstrong, Jared Silva, who's going to help run the show tonight, Nicola Meserve, and Kelly Whitmore. Tonight's public hearing and the comment period are being run under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, and pursuant to the authorities found at Mass General Laws, Chapter 130, Section 17A, 2180, and 104. The Division of Marine Fisheries is taking public comment and holding public hearings on proposed amendments to regulations at 322 CMR 4, 6, 7, and 8, affecting, as I mentioned before, Atlantic mackerel management, recreational tautog size limits, a short fin Mako prohibition, and groundfish maximum retention. Written public comment will be accepted through Friday, November 11th, 2022. Please send all written public comment via email to marine.fish@mass.gov or by post to the attention of Director Daniel McKiernan at 251 Causeway Street, Suite 400, Boston, Mass. 02114. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Jared.
Thanks, Story. So it's a virtual public hearing tonight. Those in attendance have likely been through a few of these. We wanted to take this opportunity to have a virtual public hearing given the diversity, the geographic diversity of matters to be heard tonight and the range of stakeholders involved. So with this virtual public hearing, the purpose is to, like any other public hearing, is to afford parties an opportunity to submit their data, opinions, comments, or arguments on specific amendments being proposed, or offer how the proposed amendment can be changed to minimize the impact of those affected while still achieving its goals. We strongly prefer the comments on matters outside the scope of the specific amendments being proposed not be provided during the public comment, but can be accommodated. But if time permits, we can accommodate further discussion after the meeting, or we can put you in touch with staff members who can follow up with you on certain other issues you may have tangentially related to anything being proposed or anything marine fisheries specific. We keep members of the public muted throughout the presentation. Well, typically at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll allow for clarifying questions and proposals, but I think tonight's hearing, we're going to go issue by issue, and after the end of each issue, accept clarifying comments regarding the proposals, and then public comment. So clarifying questions and then public comment. We do not respond to the written chat and question and answer functions. It ends up resulting in too much distraction. We have a pretty small audience tonight, so while we typically allow 3 minutes for public comments per public comment, we can probably provide some additional time tonight given the small amount of attendees. And we generally allow for one person to make a question or comment, and then we'll go through the queue and try to get all the people who haven't provided questions or comments before we go back to anyone who wants a second or third crack at it. Again, it's not necessary for you to provide verbal comment tonight during this public hearing. You can use this for informational purposes. and submit written comment. In fact, we recommend you submit written comment. All the public hearings will be published to our YouTube channel, and everyone has an opportunity to review them if they're not in attendance tonight. But the written comment becomes part of the formal record. Each written comment becomes part of the formal record that's supplied to our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission when we provide them with a regulatory recommendation. So that's the best way. Comments tonight are great, but the best way to submit it is to submit a written comment. We prefer the written comment is submitted by email to the marinefish@mass.gov. It just makes managing the comments that come in that much easier for us. Written comment is story stated is due by November 11th, 2020, and these written comments will be shared with the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission in advance of their November 2022 business meeting. The public hearing is being recorded. Questions and comments are part of the public record on this, and the recording of this public hearing is posted to the agency's YouTube channel, so that people who cannot attend can go back and review the various items discussed this evening. So, quick overview of the proposals. Atlantic Mackerel Management, we're looking to complement the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council's rebuilding plan for Atlantic mackerel and adopt a 20 fish per angler limit. In addition to that, we're looking to establish a new commercial regulated fishery permit for the Atlantic mackerel. Recreational Tautog, we're looking to adopt a 16 to 21 inch slot limit and allow each angler to retain one trophy fish exceeding 21 inches per calendar day. For Shortfin Mako, it's a prohibition on the retention, possession, and landing of Shortfin Mako within the waters under the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth. This is a compliance measure for the Interstate Fishery Management Plan for coastal sharks. And on groundfish maximum retention, we want to establish a regulatory framework that accommodates non-conforming size groundfish that may be possessed, landed, or sold by federal permit holders participating in the maximum retention electronic monitoring program that's being expected to be adopted as part of Amendment 23 to the Federal Groundfish Fishery Management Plan. Additionally, there's some housekeeping items tonight that we could comment on if we want, but I'll run through them at the very end of the presentation. So timeline for rulemaking, we have a public hearing tonight. The close of the public comment is a week from Friday. We expect to get the final recommendation on these proposals to the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission by Friday, November 18th in a memorandum. That memorandum will include all written public comment received and a description, summary of the public comment received tonight verbally. The commission meets on Tuesday, November 22nd, and they will have action items to review and vote on the proposals being heard tonight. For any proposals approved by the commission, they'll go into executive review and rulemaking. I anticipate that may run from about November 23rd to January 5th to promulgate final regulations on January 6th. So we'll start with Atlantic mackerel management. The proposal at hand is a 20 fish recreational limit for Atlantic mackerel. The limit will apply as a per angler harvest limit, which means that each angler can harvest up to 20 mackerel per calendar day, or per angler possession limit while fishing. Exempt for this would be mackerel held in a freezer, a fish car, or a shore-based live well. So you can aggregate mackerel for bait, provided you don't harvest or possess more than 20 in a calendar, or harvest more than 20 in a calendar day, or possess more than 20 per angler while fishing. So some background information: the 2021 stock assessment for Atlantic mackerel shows the species is overfished, with overfishing occurring, and the prior rebuilding plan was unlikely to rebuild the stock within the decade. This prompted the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council to approve a second rebuilding plan to address these stock assessment findings. This rebuilding plan was aspects of this rebuilding plan, including a federal 20 fish limit, were implemented on an emergency basis earlier this year, and the Mid-Atlantic Council is now taking comment on the full rebuilding amendment and 20 fish recreational limit for federal waters. We're here today to take comment on a corresponding action for state waters to adopt that 20 fish limit in state waters for Atlantic mackerel. State waters recreational catch provided is about 82% of the average catch from 2016 to 2020. In Massachusetts, recreational catch comprises the majority of all states' recreational catch, of all state waters recreational catch coastwide. So most of our fishery is occurring in state waters. So under the Federal Magnuson-Stevens Act, we are to adopt measures that uphold federal conservation plan. And since most of this fishery is occurring in state waters, we're moving to adopt a limit to complement the federal 20 fish limit. And as another aspect of it, the private angler mode, meaning the non-for-hire recreational anglers, comprise 87% of all MRIP saltwater catch on average from 2016 to 2020. And I believe all that data that I just provided is from the MRIP survey. Nicola or Mike, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on that. So that's why we're here tonight on mackerel. It's a 20 fish limit, and we're looking to complement the federal management measures. Another aspect of this proposal is to establish a commercial regulated fishery permit endorsement for Atlantic mackerel. That's a permit endorsement that can be placed on a base commercial fishing permit, coastal lobster permit, boat permit. That will, and what this does is twofold. First, it allows for the environmental police to differentiate between commercial and recreational fishing activity. If you hold that commercial permit, then you're allowed to catch in excess of that recreational limit. So it allows for the differentiation on that on the water. The endorsement will be established as open entry, meaning anyone with a commercial fishing permit can obtain one. The endorsement fees are $30 for a resident and $60 for a non-resident, and that's in addition to the fee for the base permit. That's just for the Atlantic mackerel endorsement. And to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what I meant by allowing the environmental police to kind of differentiate activity. So permitted commercial anglers may retain, possess, and land mackerel with an endorsement in excess of the recreational limit when either commercially fishing for mackerel or commercially fishing for another species like striped bass. So if you're a commercial striped bass fisherman and you have a commercial Atlantic mackerel endorsement, then you wouldn't be subject to that 20 fish recreational limit when commercially fishing for striped bass. So those mackerel can be used as bait by commercial fishermen or sold by commercial fishermen. Additionally, commercial anglers may not mix commercial or recreational trips. So if you're out recreationally striped bass fishing and you have that commercial endorsement, you can't wear both hats at once. So you're either fishing commercially for mackerel and you can't retain striped bass recreationally, or you're fishing recreationally for striped bass and you have to be in compliance with the commercial with the recreational fishing limit. Where this gets a little confusing is with Atlantic bluefin tuna, and we do provide an exemption to the mixing of trips rule for Atlantic bluefin tuna, because you don't necessarily know if you're going out and you're going to be landing a commercial size fish that day. So we do allow the mixing of recreational and commercial trips involving Atlantic bluefin tuna. So you could fish commercially, set commercial mackerel limits and not end up catching that commercial tuna, and you would still be covered by the commercial limit if you were a commercial permit holder. So I will take at this point any clarifying questions on these two Atlantic mackerel proposals. To ask a question, just use the raise hand function. I'll establish a queue, and I will go through the queue. Mark Millette.
Hi, I'm really sorry. Can you flip back to the previous slide for just 10 seconds?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. All set, thank you.
Okay. Chris Whitten. Chris, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, yeah, this isn't the reason I'm here. I just, this is more just for the environmental police and for everybody else, as for mixing and matching. You got to have one set law. You can't go ahead and say, okay, commercial bluefin tuna fishing can do this and commercial striper guys can't do that. And it's one law. It's straight across the board. It makes it easy for everybody. There's I realize these guys can be out for 2 or 3 days, but at the same time, you can't mix and match. If it's a 20 fish limit, it's a 20 fish limit. That's my opinion. That's just not the reason I'm on for the management here, but like I said, it's just an opinion that I have.
I appreciate the comment, Chris. Thank you. Mike Pierdock.
Hey, thank you, Jared, and thank you for your presentation. As noted on that slide, there's a 20 fish per person limit recreationally. What is the limit commercially then for a commercial vessel or one that would have this commercial permit? Can you explain that?
In Massachusetts, we don't manage the commercial fishery, so there is no commercial limit. I believe that it's a quota-based fishery managed at the federal level. So once the federal quota is taken, the fishery is closed. There's no commercial limit in Massachusetts. I'm uncertain as to what, if any, existing limits may exist in federal waters. But it is a quota managed fishery, and I believe the quota has been substantially underutilized in recent years, largely because of kind of the collapse of the midwater trawl fleet. Nicola or Mike, would you have anything to add to that? Or Kelly? Nope, not seeing anything from them. So I guess that would be my answer to that, Mike.
Yeah, Jared, thank you. And I know that there's a few different federal commercial menhaden, mackerel, wrong species permits that this would fall under if you're a federally permitted vessel. The fact that if you have someone that's just in state waters and doesn't overlap into federal, they would just be subject to this permit. Is there any kind of reporting obligation monthly or annually to report their catch?
Sure, I'll turn that to you.
Sure. As a commercial permit holder, they would have to report their commercial catch at the trip level, regardless of whether it was kept for personal use or sold. That's the requirement, and it's at the trip level monthly.
And if they were also federally reported, that would be through a federal VTR.
Correct, at the trip level, with actually a tighter timeline to get that in.
Thank you. One last question. So this has come up before. So I'm assuming then if I'm a federally permitted commercial vessel where there's a few different commercial mackerel permits, that I would also need to obtain this permit. If I come into state waters, I would need both.
Correct. This would allow the like other endorsements, be it fluke or scup, if you're fishing in federal waters or fishing in both state and federal waters. This would allow you to possess and land any fish lawfully caught in the federal zone in Massachusetts. So if that fish is going into Norpel and New Bedford, you would need that permit, even if you were catching it out in the mid-Atlantic in federal waters.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Mike. Steve V, you're recognized. Steve V, you there? Steve,
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right. So I have a six-pack license. So I just want to clarify first the part about the shore-based car. So if you have a trip and you have, say, 6 passengers on board, you could have up to 120 mackerel in your live well. At the end of a trip, those could be placed in a car that you have on your mooring and therefore stockpiled for future trips. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so my that makes sense, and I think that having the option of having 120 mackerel on a 6-person charter also makes sense for me personally. My concern, and what I do not see when I read the regulation that was posted in more detail, would be the situation where a charter captain has an 8 a.m. charter with 5 passengers. Mackerel fishing at that time might be tough during that month, so you're really only getting them at 5 o'clock in the morning. As a captain going out solo or going out only with a mate, how can you retain, or can there be an exemption, or is there an exemption for possessing bait for a trip that is coming up in that day, but those passengers are not yet on board?
That's a really good question, Steve, and a great comment. At present, my understanding of the way that the rule is written is that if you were strictly recreationally fishing, you couldn't harvest more than, if it was captain and crew, more than the 40 mackerel. But we'll certainly take that comment under advisement and address it when we respond back to our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because it seems like you had stated that 87% of the catch comes from non-charter recreational harvest, if I understood that correctly, which means that I'm assuming the other 13% is made up of various activities, of which might also be charters. So it's fair to say that the charter fishermen are responsible for, safe to say, less than 13%. So I think that would be a fair exemption, and possibly just be based straight on your permit. If you have a 6-pack license, then that exemption should be for 6 times 20, 120 mackerel on a day when a captain is later picking up passengers later for a trip. That would be my comment, my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Steve, I appreciate that. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. We can, if there's any comments on this, please raise your hand and jump in. If not, I'm going to proceed to the next topic. Oh, Phil Duckett.
I had a comment on the last speaker with the 6-pack. Would he be commercial fishing while he's out there catching his catch for his upcoming charter, and then when he made landfall again, he's switching over and now he's recreational?
Yeah, that would be something that I think would be potentially allowable, that if they had a commercial boat permit with a commercial mackerel endorsement, they could go out, catch that as commercial fish, or report that on their trip level reports, land that fish, and then begin recreationally fishing. But I think we'd have to, I think we're going to have to provide some guidance on this subject with this final rule.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. You just made the distinction, because 6-pack guys are not necessarily commercial fishermen. So that would they'd have to be both. Anyway, it's just a last minute thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve V. Steve?
I just wanted to make a follow-up comment, since somebody else just did there, and you had sort of answered that there was the possibility of perhaps that overlap in the commercial permit being used to then obtain bait to you. I really think that it's pretty clear, even, you know, if you were a recreational guide for striper and also held a commercial striped bass license, that the distinction is made that those are two separate activities. So I would think that an exemption for a charter captain on a day of a trip would be a more appropriate exemption to have there versus have them using a commercial permit to obtain bait for the recreational trip.
Yeah, understood. I think those are both fair comments. I think certainly something that we need to chew on as we move to a final rule here. You know, and kind of a nuance that a state waters fishery is going to have to deal with that maybe a federal waters fishery wouldn't, where the fishing activities occurring closer to shore and can, happen on this timeline that you described. So I appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Take on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any further hands raised on this subject. I'm going to move to the next topic, which is the recreational tautog slot limit. So the proposal here is to amend the current rule, which is a 16-inch recreational minimum size for tautog, and establish a slot limit from 16 inches to 21 inches. And then to allow each angler to retain one trophy fish per day that exceeds that 21-inch maximum size. So why are we proposing this? Well, under the Interstate Fishery Management Plan for tautog, it's the recreational fisheries are managed regionally, and the plan promotes states within a region to have similar rules. And Massachusetts and Rhode Island consist of one regional management block. And in 2022, Rhode Island adopted this 21-inch maximum size and one trophy fish allowance. We weren't, given our rulemaking timelines, we weren't able to respond for this fishing year, this current fishing year, and propose a similar action. But we committed to Rhode Island that we would bring this out to our public for 2023. So, and Rhode Island adopted this for this current year based on a stakeholder request that responds to perceived increase in fishing effort in their water, and increased catch in their water, driven from the west to the east, and an interest in preserving some of the more large and fecund females. So, if you play that squeeze the bubble idea out, that because of restrictive rules in Long Island Sound, fishing efforts moving eastward into Rhode Island, that conceivably this fishing effort could continue to move eastward into Massachusetts. So that's kind of the basis for the rule, why Rhode Island moved to do it, and then why we are following suit, both because of the potential squeezing of that balloon and to maintain consistent rules across our region, consistent with how the plan instructs us to manage this fishery. We don't expect that there's going to be much of an impact on current fishing activity in Massachusetts with the adoption of a 21-inch minimum size and a one trophy fish allowance. These are pretty large fish. Our trawl survey and length weight data indicates a 21-inch fish is about 7 pounds. That's a pretty large tautog. The frequency of catch is likely really low. We conducted a tautog rod and reel survey a couple years back, and of all the legal size fish we caught, only 3% were greater than 21 inches. This tautog rod and reel survey was conducted with the assistance of a South Coast for-hire captain and commercial fisherman who knows the fishery well. And MRIB data shows similar trends in catch. I think it shows, looking back a few years, I think it shows about 1% of catch exceeds that 21-inch minimum size in Massachusetts. But that really has large error bars on it because there's a really small sample size of intercepts, but it is interesting that it does, generally show what what are generally correspond to what our survey shows. A couple other things to consider in reviewing this is, the Massachusetts Rhode Island regional stock is not overfished or experiencing overfishing as of the last assessment. And, just so the folks on the call likely know, but our recreational possession limits in Massachusetts or seasons, fishery opens on April and May with a 3 fish bag limit. Then during the slower summer months, it moves to a 1 fish bag limit in June and July, then back up to a 3 fish bag limit for August, September, and half of October. Then on October 15th through the end of the year, when fishing is perhaps at its best, we move up to a 5 fish bag limit. So that's the proposal and some of the rationale behind it. I'd be happy to take any questions. To begin, Jack Creighton.
The Cape Cod Salty Sport Fishing Club.
Hi, Jack. How you doing?
Good, good. You hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm the past president of the Cape Cod Salty Sport Fishing Club, and I'm presently the trustee. And with the support of the Salties, tonight I'm endorsing this program. I'm pleased that the department is taking a proactive approach and acting aggressively to preserve the Tautog. And I agree with your earlier comments that there's not a heck of a lot of fish over 21 inches. So the fact that the Tautog have a short distance of travel, they stay locally in most cases. Us preserving them, especially the breeders, is important for the fishery. And again, I thank the administration for being aggressive and being forward thinking.
Thank you, Jack. Mark Millett.
Just to clarify, slot limit means you're allowed to keep fish between 16 and 21 inches.
That's correct.
I've heard it both ways, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, in this case, it would be a minimum size of 16 and a maximum size of 21.
Thank you.
David Monte.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear, David.
Great. I'm a charter captain. I keep my boat in Wickford, Rhode Island, but I also fish in Massachusetts waters. I'm also a vice chair, actually, of the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council, and I'm a fishing writer. I write for daily newspapers like the Sun Chronicle in Attleboro. I'm the Providence Journal's fishing writer, and I write for about 14 weekly newspapers in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And I only mention that because it gives me an interesting perspective on how private anglers feel. And I would just like to share that when this law was enacted, fishing regulation was acted in Rhode Island, my charter customers this season actually embraced it. They thought that it was a great move to conservation. They felt very positive about it. It actually impacted my business in a positive way because they felt that steps were being taken to preserve this great fishery of slow-going fish, leaving large female fish with great spawning potential in the water made sense to all of my customers and private anglers. So I urge the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission and the division to approve this, particularly because it will put Massachusetts and Rhode Island in sync, but it is good for the fish and good for fishermen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the comment. Will Poston.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Will, how you doing this evening?
Great, good, thanks. Well, my name is Will Poston. I'm a policy associate with the American Saltwater Guides Association. We'd like to thank the Mass DMF for holding these hearings and considering input from the fishing public. As an association, we are broadly supportive of proactive, precautionary fisheries management and support the department's proposed rule change to the Tautog regulations that would limit anglers to one fish over 21 inches and a 16 to 21 inch slot for the rest of their bag limit. That many other speakers have supported as well. Tautog are managed by the ASMFC on a regional basis, and Massachusetts and Rhode Island managed as their own region. Last year, Rhode Island implemented these proactive measures to protect older, larger tog, to sustain healthy and abundant local populations, and to preserve the robust trophy fishery that has become an economic driver for their recreational community. Bringing Massachusetts under the same slot limit as Rhode Island would streamline regulations across the management region, improve enforcement efforts, and reduce confusion among anglers, all the while managing tog proactively and maintaining future fishing opportunities. One additional argument for proactive and precautionary tog management today is the fact that anglers are targeting tog are becoming incredibly efficient given fishing equipment and advancements such as ultra thin braids, spot lock trolling technology for trolling motors, and other marine electronics. So thank you for your consideration. We'll also be submitting formal written comments supporting this proposal as well, but thanks for the opportunity to provide verbal comments here tonight as well.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. Chris Whitten?
Yes, sir. You hear me?
I can, Chris.
All right. Well, I really wish Director McKinnon was here, because I'm pretty sure that I'm probably the only one. I've been fighting for this since 2005. Director McKinnon and I, when he was assistant director and Paul Diodati was the director, Rhode Island had a 6 fish limit and we had a 3 fish limit. I asked them to increase the limit. We never got our increase. So where does the reasonable interstate thing come in here? I mean, I just don't understand this. So we're supposed to go by Rhode Island. I used to fish right next to the Francis Fleet, 7Bs, island current, all this. I talked to environmental police. We're fishing in Massachusetts waters. They're fishing in Massachusetts waters. I'm based on a 3 fish limit. You're based on a 6 fish limit. It's not fair. So where do we go ahead in Massachusetts and say all of a sudden we have to be fair with Rhode Island?
So Chris, to answer that question, and Nick, jump in here to color this if I misspeak, but several years ago, around the last stock assessment 2020, the interstate fishery management plan was adjusted to do exactly what you're saying and create more parity across regional bodies. And as a result of that, while it may not have been the case 10, 15 years ago, when you were requesting that we move to adopt similar limits to Rhode Island, the plan has since recognized that there is that these are kind of regional stocks, and that managing them as a regional unit and having parity across state rules is appropriate given this species life history. So we might be late to the party, but we did amend our recreational fishing limits several years back to have more fish in the fall as part of this, creating parity across Massachusetts or Rhode Island limits.
Yeah, I agree with, like I said, I thought, and I spoke with Director McKinnon at lengths about giving us more fish just for our business. I mean, I fish 7 days a week, every single day. We have a big party boat, and it is what it is. But at the same time, if you're looking at trying to preserve, in my opinion, the species, this 21 inches is great. I have no problem with it. The problem I have is what we have now is in the springtime. We have a 3 fish limit on Tautog. We have 100, 200, 300 boats coming up from Falmouth from, I mean, Buzzards Bay, I mean, New Bedford, all these charter boats, and they're targeting Tautog in the springtime at a 3 fish limit because we don't have sea bass open. So we're targeting Tautog. 90% of all the Tautog we catch in the springtime are females, loaded with eggs. What are we trying to preserve here?
I appreciate the comment, Chris.
That's all. I mean, it just, if we were to open up sea bass, which everyone knows we have more than enough of, and you want this Tautog fishery to thrive, stop killing females. I mean, close it. I mean, we closed the commercial fishery how many years ago for the same reason?
Yeah.
So instead of 3 fish, drop it to 1. I'm good with that, but we need something else to fish on. This is what you created. You created this fishery for everyone in the springtime because these people need something to fish for. And they're just killing the Tautog. That's all we're doing. We're killing all these females, all these egg layers. And yeah, I mean, this isn't preserving a species. This is annihilating a species.
Appreciate the comment, Chris. Thank you. I'll pass that along to the director.
Thank you.
Greg Vespi?
Can you hear me?
I can, Greg. How you doing?
Okay, I'm doing great. And I first wanted to thank everyone at the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries for having this hearing tonight and allowing folks to speak. Tonight, I do represent the Rhode Island saltwater anglers and our 7,500 members and between direct and affiliate clubs. And we have over 300 Massachusetts members. So I kind of put that out because as soon as I say Rhode Island saltwater anglers, everyone's probably thinking, well, what the heck? But we have quite a bit of crossover. And in addition to that, many of our members, myself included, fish out of Secana, work towards Westport, Buzzards Bay. So it's there's plenty of overlap. And we are thrilled that Massachusetts is considering to adopt the proactive position of including a slot limit to protect the larger fish. It's something that we see this wave of Tautog fans and a little bit what Chris just mentioned, the increase in attention Tautog have experienced over the last few years in particular is amazing. If you go out to any recreational tackle shop, any dock, any boat ramp in the fall and in the spring, you're going to see people catching tog now. With the gear improvements and the technology, it's become fun. They're still great food fish. We don't want to take that away. I think the thing that we're the most excited about this proposal is that we don't feel it takes any of the excitement away from fishing. You can still catch your personal record, your club record, you can still win a tournament, you can set the state record, you can set the world record, right? So unlike a lot of slots that kind of bump out that option, we don't think this takes away any of that. It has been wildly popular in Rhode Island this year. All the charter boat captains that were part of RISA that supported it when it went through as a proposal have been thrilled with it so far. So that's been really encouraging. The nice thing for Mass is that it's not an unknown. You can at least look across the border and it's been enacted for a year. So we think that's great too. And just these slow growing fish, what I want to close with is unlike a lot of fish that migrate further away from our coast and down the coast, that no matter what Mass or Rhode Island does to protect these fish, if they end up in a gill net off the Carolinas or someplace, well, that didn't work so well. But that's not going to happen with these tog. If we take care of them, they will come home. They will come back to us. And they also release really well, right? Of all recreational fish you can catch, tog seem to be about as tough as you get. So it makes for a good fish that can be released. You can take a few pictures. You can do whatever you want as a charter boat captain, as a recreational fisherman, and you can still let these fish go. So we are extremely excited about the possibility that Massachusetts will consider adopting the trophy fish reg. And I think when we look back in time, if it happens, we'll all really feel good about it. And the very last thing I'll say is, if we wait for the science to tell us that we have to take action or stop fishing for these tog, they grow so bloody slow that by the time science tells us we have to do something, it's going to be late and it is going to take years, if not decades, to undo it. So of all fish to be proactive with, we think this is the one for a host of the regions that I mentioned. And thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the perspective. Dave Doobie.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes, go right ahead, Dave.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to go on record. I'm a Massachusetts fisherman, resident in Mass. Do a lot of boating, a lot of fishing, do a lot of tournament fishing. We've had several clubs in Rhode Island I belong to also. We've done a lot of tournament fishing this year, very successfully with the new regs. And it's been very much fun. And a lot of people are just extremely positive about letting go some of these big females. And the slot limit has not affected anybody's excitement or fishing ability. And the ability to be able to keep one fish over 21 inches, it's just huge. We used to fish a lot for stripers, but because it's just simply a slot fish now, there's not much excitement about catching a large striper any longer. It's almost like a waste of money to go out there and fish for fish that you can't keep or you can't record. So I just want to go on record and say I fully support this proposal, and I hope you have good luck with it and it goes through.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Fred DeFinis.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, Fred. How you doing this evening?
This is Fred DeFinis, former Massachusetts resident and now a Rhode Island angler, but for 32 years I fished 50-50 in both states. So first of all, I'd like to say that any movement in regulation that puts the two states closer together, I think is terrific. With this particular one, we've been fishing this year and certainly we've been having as much fun as ever. We're eating as well as ever. I can't see any negative at all. This past Sunday, we threw back a large one, even though we could have kept it. So, I think this is a terrific regulation, and for people of future generations are going to reap the benefit of this when these fish start reproducing and the next year class comes along and grows up to be keeper fish. So I strongly support this as a former resident of Massachusetts, person who's fished in both states and really enjoys this fishery. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this.
Thank you, Fred. Steve Miller, you're up. Steve, you can unmute yourself. You're recognized.
Okay, we're unmuted, correct?
Sure.
All right. Steve
Thanks for
Miller.
joining us.
Steve Miller, recreational fisherman. I just want to say I'm in full support of adopting the amendment. I think it's a very reasonable and proactive way to help preserve the fishery. And of course, it strengthens what should be a regional approach to manage the fishery. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Phil Duckett.
Hi, this is Phil again. I'm a Rhode Island fisherman, and I also applaud you guys for considering, particularly the slot limit. I know that I have thrown back this year a lot of 21-inch plus fish after having caught a 21-inch fish, and still getting plenty of 16 plus fish for meat, and that's and I love Tautog, a great eating fish, but you don't a 19 or 20-inch fish is a huge fish for a meal, and I just applaud you guys for considering the 21-inch slot limit as well, and to support what Chris was saying earlier. We got more freaking sea bass than we know what to do with. So if that commercial sector is willing to go down to a one fish limit in the spring and get some sea bass in there, I would encourage you guys to consider that too. Appreciate your time and listening to me. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Phil. Have a good evening. Jeff Amari.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Doing well, Jeff.
All right, so I own the Bad Influence. I fish out of Mass and Rhode Island. And I bring my boat to Rhode Island in the fall to blackfish. So currently I am fishing under the slot limit right now based upon Rhode Island regulations. And I'm in favor of it. There's a lot of pressure on the blackfish now. There's probably every day 20 to 30 boats fishing in Rhode Island waters for blackfish, and all the fish in Rhode Island waters, most of the time do come from Mass waters. So I'm in favor of it. I'm also in favor of a 4-fish bag limit, because blackfish now is more of like the tug is in the drug. So a lot of guys mostly chase them just because of the sport, not for a meat fishery. So I'm in favor of the slot. I'm in favor of a lower bag limit. I don't think that lowering the bag limit from 5 to 4 will hurt my business at all. So that's what I believe in.
All right, Jeff, I appreciate it. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you very much.
Mike Piernock.
Thank you, Jared. I'm still back with questions. I don't have any comments. My first question is, will the season and bag limit be maintained with this measure?
There's no proposal now that would adjust the season or bag limit. So what we have in place now would continue to apply. If there's interest in changing that, that's a separate management action, and we'd want to do that with Rhode Island since we've taken some effort to get some uniformity across our jurisdictions.
As some have noted on this call here on this Zoom, for me personally and others, we conduct these conservation measures to, do what's in the best interest of the fishery. One individual noted females to protect them. And was there any thought in this process of considering that type of measure?
Would that be eliminating or reducing the springtime fishery?
No, just the fact, when they're spawning, and to throw back females when they're spawning.
So no, we didn't consider either of those proposals as part of this. Again, the primary driver for this was to create consistent rules across Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We weren't able to go out with that last year, just given timing. So we wanted to do our due diligence to do that this year, as that is an objective of the Interstate FMP. And we did hear positive feedback from our colleagues in Rhode Island about the public's response to this rule. So, we view this, while this may have some conservation benefits and contributing to older, larger fish and more fecund fish in the population, the primary driver of this was to have consistent rules across jurisdictions.
Last question, since you have a slot limit, there will be discards, and since you have a trophy sized fish, there could be discharge if there's more than one caught. So what is, based on the science, the assumed amount of dead discards that would be generated as a result of this measure?
Nicola or Mike, do you have any numbers on that?
Well, I not specifically. I know that a 2.5% release mortality rate is used, I believe. So as a commenter said, the discard mortality rate is low, and we said that there's not many fish being caught above 21 inches. So that those two factors combined doesn't suggest a large increase from discard mortality.
And just one last question. I understand there's, as it's noted, there's significant recreational landings going on in Rhode Island that could have an impact on measures next year. Have you seen any of that data and information, Nicola?
My understanding is that both the Mass and Rhode Island MRIP estimates from last year were up pretty significantly. But you know, in terms of whether that's causing overfishing or not, we'll have to wait for the next stock assessment.
When will you have an answer on that then?
The next stock assessment, I'll check the schedule and respond momentarily.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We've got a couple more comments from the public here. Jeff Murray. Jeff, you're
Sorry,
recognized.
sorry to bother you guys again. I just had another question. I know we're trying to adopt the slot limit, but I know Rhode Island had tried to vote on the 4-fish limit. Is Massachusetts taking that under consideration at all moving forward? Or are we just trying to focus on the slot limit?
Tonight we're focused on the slot limit. I was unaware that Rhode Island was moving forward with a 4-fish limit, but if they do and that's passed, you know, it may be something we want to consider. But that's not something that's on the docket tonight.
Okay, all right, and then I know I want to follow up to Mike's comment with the stock assessment. I know that you guys said you have to see on the calendar when it is happening. Are there any MRIP information? You know, are we doing MRIP? Are we doing HAC moving forward with the Blackfish? And when will that data become available so we can make an educated decision on how to move forward?
All right. Well, I see my colleague Nicola's got her hand raised, so I assume she's got some information on the stock assessment to respond to Mike, and she might be able to help you there with that.
Yeah, so the ASNFC publishes the stock assessment schedule for Tautog, and the next assessment is tentatively scheduled for 2024. But it has a little note saying under consideration, not officially scheduled. So it looks like that, you know, is still open to whether it'll be that year or not. In terms of the MRIP landings, we have estimates from last year, and we probably have at this point waves 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4 posted at this point. So that data can be compiled and included in the memo that the division prepares for the Marine Fisheries Commission.
Okay, great. Just because you know, like I said, I moved my boat to Rhode Island in this time of year, and the pressure has grown exponentially since, you know, the 9 years I've been there. And you know, even today on what is today, on Monday or Tuesday, there were still 25 boats fishing locally. So I know that, you know, those boats are going into mass waters because I had to go to mass waters today. So just curious on, you know, the assessment moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris Wood, and welcome back.
I'm gonna unmute myself here.
You're good.
I kind of disagree with your assessment on the you know, kind of the dead loss that we have. You know, it's kind of like the same thing we have with codfish. Okay, when you reel a codfish up from 250 feet of water, you know, the expectancy of that fish making it down to the bottom is not very high. And in December, like I said, you know, early December, late December, we're fishing 150, 160, 180 feet of water, and these tog come up and they blow up. They're like any other fish, they blow up. So your mortality rate is not what you think it is. And especially most of the fish that we catch, those are your trophy fish. Those are your big ones that we get. You know, it's just a shame. If you only allowed one fish, yeah, everybody on the boat has, you know, 6 or 8 fish that are well over 21 inches, and we got to throw them all back, and they're all dead. So it's just an opinion.
All right. I appreciate the perspective, Chris. Thank you.
Yep.
Chris, did you have a follow-up comment? I see your hand went back up.
No, sir, I actually hit the lower hand. I'm sorry.
No, we must have hit it at the same time and put your hand back up. I'll let you do it.
All right.
All right, with that, I don't see any more comments from the public. for questions on this proposal, so we'll move to the third issue on tonight's agenda, which is the proposal to prohibit the retention, possession, and landing of shortfin Mako in Massachusetts state waters, with the exception that it would be authorized if lawfully caught in federal waters, but at present, there's a federal prohibition on this. So current recreational rules are 83-inch fork length for females, 71-inch fork length for males, one shark at most per angler or vessel. And there's zero retention from long lines and zero retention if alive at haulback from a gill net fishery. So this would prohibit any remaining commercial rod and reel or any recreational fishing for shortfin Mako. As I stated at the outset, this is a interstate compliance measure. So ICAT determined the member countries needed to reduce the shortfin Mako fishing mortality to accelerate stock recovery and increase the probability of rebuilding. This prompted NOAA Fisheries to propose a federal prohibition on shortfin Mako retention. And that was adopted back in July of this year. Then the ASMFC followed suit and adopted a zero retention limit and the coastal shark FMP. So now we're kind of the last segment to follow on this, and to comply with that interstate management plan to adopt zero retention rule in Massachusetts for Massachusetts state waters. We estimate that shortfin Mako catch in state waters is negligible. Most of the catch occurs in federal waters. And, regardless, federal permit holders would be held to the most restrictive rule, whether fishing in state or federal waters. So we think that the impact of this, given the federal zero retention policy, is likely nominal, and it's mostly a compliance exercise to ensure that our state regulations come in line with the interstate fishery management plan. So, Nicola, do you have anything to add on that?
I think the only thing I would add is that the federal rule as it's proposed does include a process through which the federal limit could change in the future if ICAT allows it. And that can be done, relatively quickly through this process that they're adopting. So rather than us have to continue to mirror something potentially for a species that really isn't caught in state waters, our approach here would be to prohibit it in state waters, but allow the transiting from federal waters if it's allowed there.
Thanks. That's a good clarification. Thank you. So I will take any questions from the public or comments. We can mix and match if you want, as we've been doing. All right. Well, I'm not seeing anything, and I appreciate that because it gives me a chance to take a break from speaking. I'm going to turn this over to Story for our last major topic tonight, which is groundfish maximum retention.
Okay, thanks, Jared. This groundfish maximum retention proposal is to establish a regulatory framework in state regulation for federally permitted vessels and dealers to possess, land, sell, purchase, and process non-conforming sized groundfish, meaning undersized groundfish that was taken lawfully by vessels participating in the federal maximum retention electronic monitoring program. So by way of background, this proposal seeks to accommodate the federal groundfish maximum retention program. This program exempts all participating vessels from minimum size standards for certain groundfish and allows for maximized retention of fish caught, meaning undersized groundfish, for example, haddock and redfish, thereby eliminating regulatory discarding. Vessels participating in this program are subject to onboard electronic monitoring as well as dockside monitoring. NOAA Fisheries, New England States, and the Gulf of Maine Research Institute have conducted a multi-year experimental fishery to analyze the efficacy of a maximum retention electronic monitoring program. and it has proven successful. So now the New England Fishery Management Council has approved the formal adoption of this max retention electronic monitoring program for federal groundfish sector vessels as part of Amendment 23. And vessels would have to opt into this program and abide by all its requirements. The implementation is currently pending final adoption by NOAA Fisheries, but we expect it fairly soon. For the pilot program, DMF has accommodated this experimental fishery through letters of authorization for the permitting vessels and dealers, which has been okay as it's been a kind of smaller group of vessels. But with formal adoption at the federal level, DMF seeks to create a consistent regulatory framework to allow this catch to be landed, possessed, sold, and processed in Massachusetts. So again, this really impacts a federal program in the federal groundfish fishery, but allows the landing in Massachusetts. And those are the details we have. I'll take any questions or comments.
Seems you're lucky tonight's story. There's no hands raised.
Yeah, you just got a brief break, Jared.
Oh, well.
No comments or questions. I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, so the last topic tonight is housekeeping. We typically talk these at the very end of our public hearings because as we go through and adopt new regulations, we reread the things we've written in the past, and we find slight modifications that either we're required to make as part of executive mandates, or that it's come to our attention that they no longer are necessary, or they're redundant, or maybe some things need to be moved from one section to another as we rearrange the CMR. So in summary, we're proposing to eliminate the term grandfather and to adopt the term fisher rather than fisherman or fishermen, consistent with executive mandates to kind of create a more gender neutral regulatory code, and to eliminate terms like grandfather that have racial connotations in their history. I believe that has to deal with voting rights. Eliminates then, more specific to what we're doing in our CMR. We're eliminating section 8.08 and establishing it as a reserve section. 8.08 has some redundant provisions that have been adopted elsewhere in the CMR. I think dealing with the winter flounder spawning closure and overall vessel length in mobile gear fisheries. So those rules exist elsewhere. So we're moving to just eliminate that section, get rid of those redundant rules and make that a reserve section. Throughout the CMR, there's some language that defines black sea bass pots and mobile gear exemption areas that were misprinted. So there's meaning that there's some typographical errors in there that we're going to correct. And then, we're proposing to move our commercial buoy line marking rules from the fixed gear rules at CMR 4 to the protected species rules at CMR 12, as they're related to, as while they do affect, they are fixed gear rules, they're driven by the protected species plan, specifically the Atlantic large whale take reduction plan. And as a result of this movement, we're going to reorganize the remaining aspects of those sections so that they're more clearly enumerated. So that's the real interesting stuff I get to do with my job. And if there's any comments on them, I'd gladly take them, or questions. And if not, I'd gladly turn this back over to Story to close out tonight's meeting. So, Story, I'm not seeing anything else, so I'll pass it back to you.
All right, thanks, Jared. So to wrap up tonight, we'll be accepting written public comment on all of these proposals and the proposals that we're going to run through on Thursday night, I guess. But until Friday, November 11th, 2022, please address written comments to Director McKiernan and submit by email to marine.fish@mass.gov, which is our preferred method, or by mail to 251 Causeway Street, Suite 400, Boston, Mass. 02114. Recording of this public hearing and all our public hearings will be published on DMF's YouTube channel. So with that,
I'd just add to that, that tonight's presentation will also be posted to our proposed regulations page first thing tomorrow morning.
okay. Sounds good. And that concludes tonight's public hearing. And Jared, if you want to turn off the recording, we can just see if anybody has any other questions for us.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.